Well, there we say it. Marathon talks in Greece to secure the billions in bailout money to keep them from going broke look like they might be close to the finish line. The other pieces of the deal, a haircut for existing bondholders, involvement of the European Central Bank and the structure of the new bailout fund are slowly forming too. So, is there a light at the end of the tunnel for Europe, or is that another train coming the other way? I'm joined from our London studio by David Buik from BGC Partners. And David, well, we've had these marathon talks, as I said, overnight, no agreement yet, and pension cuts seem to be the sticking point.
Good evening, Tiki. Yes, they seem to be the last dot that needs to be put on the I's, is this 300 million cuts that are required in the pensions. I mean, the Greek people have taken a real pasting. The problem is that they haven't really delivered in many of these austerity cuts. It's all been chat and talk. There's been no sale at all of assets. They presumably had something over 60 billion euros worth of assets that were up for sale, but there's been absolutely no progress made there at all. I think, and I can only rather cynically call this a charade, I think it will be agreed. I think Jean-Claude Juncker is very keen to get the finance ministers together today, providing the Greek government can deliver on this last thing, and one would suspect it would be rather silly if they didn't, having had 3 postponements. But the fact remains, at the end of the day, they will be in a position to repay their 14.5 billion loan on the 20th of March and take up their 130 billion facility. But I'm afraid the cynics like me are queuing up round the corner saying there is no way they can sustain debt at these levels and service it and grow their economy. And the sooner that the European Union realises this, the better. But I think if there is going to be either a technical fault or an orderly default, it's better that it should have happened in 2012 rather than in 2010 or 11.
And of course, presumably, these austerity measures have to get through Parliament as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. As I say, the rhetoric's been wonderful. I mean, you know, all those wonderful Greek philosophers from 1,000 years ago would have loved it. But it doesn't get the job done. And that is the real concern. We've seen the terrible riots in the street and the unhappiness of the Greek people. It's all very well Parliament agreeing it. Can they deliver it?
Now, David, I see a Wall Street Journal article overnight says the central bank, European Central Bank, looks like it's going to forgive Greek debt to the tune of about 11 billion euros. Is that true?
I think in order to have an orderly return to liquidity for the entire system, I think events have rather overtaken Mario Draghi. So I'm not in a position to say whether it's true, but I'd be quite surprised if it wasn't true. Because I think if you're going to have a really smooth operation, I think constantly we always have to remind ourselves, Tiki, that over here in Europe, and to a certain degree, though a lesser degree in the United States, the wholesale money markets are moribund. So any kind of liquidity that can be provided to make sure that the system doesn't come to a grinding halt is absolutely essential. Over here, banks are happy to lend each other money for overnight or a week fixed or perhaps up to a month. But that's not a proper money market. And until confidence is restored in the system, I'm afraid the central banks are going to continue to play a huge role. And I think they're probably going to have to increase the level of quantitative easing. The Bank of England, of course, reached today.
Yes, another 50 billion pounds, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it will be another 50 billion. A lot of people were saying 75 before the data actually started to improve during the course of the last couple of months. So maybe it'll only be 50 billion, but I honestly don't think that the economies of either the European Union or the UK are in any state to say, we don't need it anymore, we've done enough, life gets on. It's awful for pensioners, people who want to save and get some income, but I'm afraid we have to look at the bigger picture.
Now, David, when we last spoke, we talked about Stephen Hester, the chief of the Royal Bank of Scotland, and having had to decline his bonus. I'm interested in this in part because Stephen Hester was the first guy to give me a job in investment banking years and years ago, but he's now come out, hasn't he, and spoken publicly about how that felt and the damage it did to him and indeed the bank.
Well, I think he underestimated, as we all did, the incredible damage, again, as I say, the attack by not only the opposition but some members of the British coalition government as well, did on him and to the Royal Bank of Scotland. I think to have compared Stephen Hester's bonus with that of an average trader or a very senior trader is actually an insult to him. He is actually not that well paid by international standards. Obviously, £1.2 million is a very decent salary. I think they've denigrated the position of Chief Executive Officer. I think he gave a wonderful account of himself to the press, where he clearly had an open day yesterday.
Yes.
And told them his hearts and how he felt about his heart and how he felt about things. Yeah. I like to think he'll see this job through. I hope the politicians get off his back, because there have been impairment costs of about £38 billion against profits probably generated of £33 million. So the job is slowly but surely getting done.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see. I know he's going to release the goals that he set for the bank back in 2008 in a couple of weeks' time. But David Buik, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.